think it's time we blow this scene, get everybody on their stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and hello, and welcome back to James and the Frames. I'm your host, James, and here I talk about some of my favorite frames ever filmed, and now apparently movies in general, because I'm kind of slanting more towards that. Hope everybody has had a happy Thanksgiving, happy weekend of Black Fridays and all that jazz. No pun intended. Hope everyone is transitioning well into Christmas, because the day after Thanksgiving, everything just turns into Christmas. No one really appreciates those last few days of November, but I'm going to try to do so with this episode. So this episode is going to be a lot more Netflix orientated. Now, why Netflix, James, you may ask? Well, I saw two pieces of media that came directly from Netflix over the course of this past week. One of them being the highly anticipated adaptation of the Cowboy Bebop anime, one of my favorite shows in existence. It is the perfect gateway into anime and that whole genre, but it's also a masterclass in writing and character study and action sequences and music. So I saw that adaptation and I have my thoughts on it, which I'll get to in a second. And I'm also going to talk about the new Lin Manuel Miranda film, his directorial debut, if I'm not mistaken, Tick Tick Boom, starring Andrew Garfield in the lead role as Jonathan Larson. He's playing that role. I never really knew the whole backstory of Tick Tick Boom or Rent. I know that play is very impactful. Well, now I know because I did my research after watching the picture, but it's also a new release on Netflix that just came out in this past week or so, and I'm excited to talk about it. So first, let us dive into Cowboy Bebop. Now, Cowboy Bebop, I'm going to talk about it spoiler-free first, because I know there's a lot of people who love the anime, adore the anime, and have a bit of a bad track record with live-action anime adaptations. I, for one, also had one. A certain experience with an anime called Death Note, and the live-action Western adaptation of it was done. It was done very poorly, and it didn't really regard the original material in any way, shape, or form. Hell, it didn't even exist on its own as a competent piece of writing or media. So I can understand how people are cautiously optimistic of going in to see this. And I, for one, am pleasantly surprised. Now, I've been following all the updates, all the trailers, all the clips of the new series. I remember being super hyped when that first opening dropped and Yoko Kanno was announced coming back as the composer, and then they got this little side teaser, which was called The Lost Session, which was like a short 3-minute clip that kind of showcased what the show was going to be like. And it really got my hype ramping up, because The Lost Session, that little short clip, encapsulated so much of what made the original so great. It leaned a little bit more towards the goofy and campy side of it, which is fine by me, because the Edgar Wright sort of presentation of it and similarities to Watanabe's direction in the original anime, the way fight scenes were filmed and composed, and it was a really promising teaser and a really promising setup. And for the most part, it actually delivers. I went into this show having seen the original Cowboy Bebop no less than maybe a little over 2 years ago. It's been a while since I've rewatched it, and I think that having not seen the show in such a long time and going into the adaptation kind of fresh-minded, knowing important plot points from the original show, but not entirely remembering everything that happens in between, it put me in a really interesting position. And I was excited to revisit and see if it could recapture those memories. And for the most part, it did also. I will say that the casting here is phenomenal. The core 3 characters, most of all, that of Spike, Jet, and Faye. Brilliant casting, great chemistry between everyone. They fully embrace their characters. It's just great casting, and it's a very difficult thing to do when casting an anime adaptation. I know that Keanu Reeves was originally slated to play Spike, and that would have been great casting also, but John Cho really pulls it off. Not that Keanu wouldn't, but for this adaptation, he does amazing. He has the coolness, he has the, I don't want to say viciousness, but fierceness that comes with Spike's character also. The seriousness, the stoic nature that he has. And also Mustafa Shakir, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's amazing as Jet. His voice sounds exactly like the American dub. But the show also makes him a lot more human in this adaptation. It makes Jet a lot more human, and he plays with that incredibly well, which I'll get into. And then we have Daniela Pineda, who's also great casting for Faye. She has that snarkiness, she has that charismatic side to her. And there are lines in the show where I was like, yep, that's Faye, that's how she'd act. But of course, the main three aren't the only characters in the show, and we also have characters such as Vicious, the main villain of the show, played by Alex Hassel. He does a great job with the character. He's a great choice for Vicious. I loved him when he was on screen, but there's a certain direction they went with his character that I'll talk about in a second. And then Elena Satine as Julia, who also plays a more prominent role in the show. And again, I'm going to get into differences from the anime, but then again, when talking about this adaptation, in the way that I saw it, it made me separate this show from the anime in a very distinct way. And a lot of people who go into this will be instantly comparing it to the anime. It's not a bad thing to do, but I would highly recommend going in to see this as a separate adaptation from the anime. Like, don't make direct comparisons episode per episode. Kind of look at this as the same cast of characters thrown into a different storyline. And for the most part, the storyline is good. It's not amazing. It's not spectacular, mind-blowing like the original show was. Again, I'm making comparisons. I probably should stop doing them because I'm contradicting myself, but it does a good job with what it's trying to convey. And people might have some serious issues with the changes that undergo in the story here. But I will say that the cast is amazing. The action sequences are actually, some of them are really great. Like, they're really well shot, really well edited, very well choreographed. There were sequences that were really thrilling. Like, some of them didn't really hit the mark, but I really enjoyed them. And as for the score, well, there's really nothing else you can say. It's Yoko Kanno. She's a genius in what she does, and she brings the heat. She even brings new tracks, and there's a really cool variation that I'm going to talk about in a little bit here when we get into spoilers, because I can talk about Cowboy Bebop just spoiler-free for most of the episode, but for some of you to really understand my point, I need to get into spoilers. So before I do so, I have one more thing to say. And I think this is a very important thing to have in mind. This show is not made by incompetent writers or people who are not passionate for the original source material. There is clearly a lot of respect and well, of course, passion put into this that is faithful, and I think will actually please most fans. I don't think that this is going to be a total hate train show, and I really, really strongly recommend going into this with a positive mindset. Look for the positives in it, and don't go in hating it from the get-go just because it's an adaptation, because I know that's an issue with Western adaptations, but trust me, this is the closest we're ever going to get to actual good live-action adaptation storytelling. Like, I think this is the adaptation that will start the shift. I think writers and directors and producers, most of all, understand the importance of these stories. And adapting such a ginormously successful show into this format, it's a big task, guys, and it's really hard to do, and they did a really good job with what they did. And I can't ramble along spoiler free any longer, so let's get into spoiler discussion. So if you haven't seen Cowboy Bebop, we're obviously into spoilers, and for those of you who haven't seen the original Cowboy Bebop, there's also spoilers for that too, so probably should have watched it if you're going to watch the live. Although I don't hold it against you if you've seen the live action one before the anime. It's really makes a difference to me, because either show is good in its own ways. And this is the big, not issue, but feeling I have about the live action adaptation, is that it has an okay story. Like, it's engaging. I was still hooked by it. And the final episode was still thrilling. Like, I had like that nervous tingle throughout my body when I see suspenseful stuff. Like, it was good. The thing is that the original wasn't as focused on the broader storyline as it was focused on the tiny little anthology stories that the characters went through. And the main story kind of sat in the background. Like, it was always there. It was always hanging there. And in a couple episodes, it came full force, and you'd get small glimpses into it, and you could let the mystery kind of like fill your brain, and you could think about what happened in the past and what happened to these characters before they became who they are. More specifically, in the Ballad of Fallen Angels episode, in episode 5 of the original, we get a huge revelation about Spike's past and his relationship with Vicious. What the live action adaptation does is that it sets up that big story right from the get-go. And it does an okay job of executing those story points. But for one, and I mentioned this before, Vicious gets way too much screen time. He was constantly present in every episode, which is something I did remember from the original show, is that he was barely present throughout the entire show. He only appeared, I think, like 3 or 4 times, and from what I can recall. And my memory of him, actually my first memory, was when, of course, Faye notices him at the opera, and we get this really sinister presence, and to have one of the main characters react that way to a villain, it was like, whoa, like, who is this guy? And then, of course, we see the amazing sequence in Ballad of Fallen Angels, and it set up Vicious to be truly vicious. So to have him be sort of like a recurring character in the live action adaptation, it diminishes his power, the sinister presence he had. And Alex Hassel does a great job playing the character that was written. And again, I'm contradicting myself by comparing this show to the original anime, but I feel like it's important to do for folks who are listening to this and who want to hear my opinions on what differs from the show and what doesn't. But his story was explored so much in this adaptation that it didn't stick the landing for me. And what also didn't stick the landing was his relationship with Julia and Julia's character herself. She's also pretty prominent, and she wasn't as prominent in the original anime either. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. In fact, I like that these characters are having a chance to be more fleshed out. But in Julia's case, she was great. I loved her up until the very moment in episode 10 when she suddenly decides that she wants to take over the syndicate and not run away from it, which was kind of what I thought her character arc was building towards. But there's this, I don't want to say Anakin or Daenerys type flip, but there is in that episode where she has her little exchange with Spike, and there's a justifiable argument to be made that, like, Spike not coming after her, like, how is that? Like, you've been free for 3 years, I've been trapped here, why didn't you come? Like, I get that. But the whole twist of her being the villain now suddenly and trapping Vicious and saying, oh, I'll speak for you now, like, I thought that was a bit rushed. And I don't think that was explored properly. It was never really mentioned at all either. And that's what kind of bugged me about the side characters there. I mean, Vicious had some really great moments. There's this one, I can't recall the specific one. It's actually, no, yeah, I can recall it. I can't remember if it was episode 9 or episode 10. It's when he kills all of the elders, including his father. He goes and, like, does this cool trick where he has that hollow projection thing. He cuts off that one dude's head, and it's actually revealed to be the guy, not him. There's just this moment where he just goes all out. He gets stabbed and stuff, and he's, like, super, like, really, like, insanity. And there's this score that accompanies him. It's like this low, droning, like, buzzing sort of score, but it's really sinister. And when he walked up with that katana and, like, looked at the room and, like, had that moment with his father, I was really like, wow, this is Vicious. And why didn't I get an introduction to Vicious like this? Because that's another thing that kind of bothers me too, is that the first interaction between Vicious and Spike comes through like a phone call. and it's Spike pointing a rifle at him and having their first encounter be that fight in the church. That was mind-blowing. And it was a face-to-face encounter. And it kind of lessens the impact of their relationship having it done like that. So I know I'm rambling. I am rambling, but I found myself more intrigued by what the Bebop crew was doing rather than Vicious and Julia and that whole other backstory, what that was. I didn't really find it all that interesting. The one thing I did find really cool was how Spike kind of saved Vicious's life by going on that massacre and like killing a bunch of people. Like, I thought that was really interesting. It's something that clearly weighs on his character, and it's really fully explored by the final episode. And the final episode, by the way, it's the best episode in close competition with the first one, but episode 10, it's got the most like heightened tension. It kind of builds up towards that point. And episode 5 was also really great. The Jet's backstory was executed super well. That was a really great episode with the dirty cop betrayal and all that. And I love me some good detective screenwriting. Love that. But episode 10, it leaves the show off in such a way that I'm really intrigued to see where they'd take it in a season 2. And it actually surprises me to say that I want a season 2 of this show. I think that it's actually a really great adaptation. It's not the greatest, but it's still really fun. But I think that's what sums up what I like about this show the most, about the adaptation, is that it's fun, it's entertaining. And really, there's a lot to unpack with Cowboy Bebop. You have themes of moving on and maturity and, very, very dark themes and very, of course, mature themes, as I just mentioned. Might as well mention it one more time. But the Netflix show, it has a couple of those themes in it, but it's not overly reliant on them, and it's not as complex and meditative and pensive as the original show's script is. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that by giving the show time, by giving it 2 seasons, or maybe possibly a 3rd season, would do it some good. I think that the way that all the characters went their separate ways in episode 10, like Jet resenting Spike for being a part of the syndicate, and I loved that whole dynamic also. Jet like kind of not slowly getting on to Spike about it, but inching closer and closer to the truth, and him having to keep that away from Jet was really interesting. I loved that. But ultimately, the betrayal dynamic of Jet and Spike is really interesting. I love the way he's like, yeah, you took a bullet for my daughter and you saved her, but you also put her in danger and lied to me for, I don't know, a really long time. So, sorry, dude, can't hang with you. I was really left intrigued and wanting to see what would happen with that story thread. And of course, Faye finding out what her past was and all that. That was explored in the anime, but I'm not as familiar with it. So I'm excited to see where her path goes. And then we get Spike, and he runs into Radical Edward, makes an appearance in the final 40 seconds, or 50, or however long, like a minute of the episode. And I have to say one thing. Please don't attack the actor playing Ed. When Ed appeared, I was like, yeah, that's him. He's a bit over the top and a bit obnoxious, but that's kind of what Ed was like when he was first introduced in the show. I remember my first interaction with Ed in Cowboy Bebop. It wasn't like, wow, this is an iconic character. I was kind of like, yeah, like, who is this kid? Like, what? He's kind of weird. Sorry, it's not a he, it's a she. So I say to the people saying that, oh, this is a terrible Edward and blah, 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 just wait a minute. Just wait for season 2. Don't, just like, slow down. Alright, guys, like, just take it easy. Like, if you'd gone into this show not having seen the original Cowboy Bebop, or having gone into the original Cowboy Bebop having not seen this show, I still feel like the introduction to Ed would have been the same. You would have been like, wait, who is this kid? Like, really? This is Radical Edward? Okay, I guess we're gonna grow on them, because an entire character arc can't happen in 40 seconds, so I'd say give it a rest. I'd say Edward will be back in season 2. And another thing that they hint towards is that he mentions Vincent from the Cowboy Bebop movie. And I know that Vincent, I mean, the Bebop was still together when they went after Vincent, so I'm guessing Vincent would be the main antagonist of season 2, which is good. I mean, Vincent was actually a great secondary option to Vicious. Like he was a formidable match for Spike in that movie. So I remember having seen it such a long time ago. I have to revisit the original Cowboy Bebop anime in the movie. It's been a while. I'm interested to see where they'll go in season 2. And as for Julia and Vicious, we'll see about that too, I guess. I mean, Julia's turn was just so abrupt, and Vicious kind of being treated as like, and this is another thing that I have a bit of an issue with. Vicious is kind of overused, I want to say. Like, that kind of goes hand in hand with being on screen a lot, but I feel like he's overused in terms of outbursts and certain lines of dialogue and actions that the character does. Again, not criticizing performance. Alex Hassel has some incredible, like, moments, like facial expressions, but sometimes it's a bit much. Not performance wise, but writing wise. Like, he sometimes he begs for his life, or sometimes he acts in a certain way, like lashing out. Like, it's kind of like the same. I'd make this comparison with the way the Death Note adaptation handled L, because L in the anime, he was a lot more quiet. He was a lot more like calculating and silent, and in the adaptation, he's a bit more all over the place. Kind of reacts a lot, throws stuff. Like, I'm not saying that it's at that level of like bad character adaptation, but still, with Vicious, it was less is more, and I feel like the live action adaptation is just adding the more in, and it's being kind of like a show don't tell, but show don't tell is a bit too much. Like, you're showing a bit too much of a character who remained vague and mysterious. But let's go to the technical aspects. Pretty well shot. I mean, there were a few episodes that felt a bit bland in terms of cinematography. It didn't match the style I wanted to see from the teasers that I saw, and especially the Lost Session teaser. I thought the whole show was going to be like that, stylized. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And in episode 1, it actually was like that. That has to be probably the... I mean, I know it's a direct reference to the opening of the film. In the original movie, Spike and Jet go stop a robbery, and it's kind of like the same situation, but here it's a bit more stylistic because they're in this colorful casino, and I love the shot where it pans out to show them on this giant resort spaceship. The way Spike is introduced, and that Yoko Kanno score kicks in as he flips that coin upwards and then just kicks it towards the guy. It was amazing. I just fell out of my seat. I was like, wow, that's Cowboy Bebop for you. That opening scene for episode 1, and most of episode 1 is reminiscent of the Lost Sessions, but some episodes, like episode 9, episode 7, episode 6, it was kind of bland in terms of cinematography. Like, I didn't really feel that same energetic, vibrant style that I saw in that teaser, and I kind of wish they'd keep that throughout the entire show, because it really, really comes into play in episode 5, episode 1 and 2, and episode 10, and I think it was episode 3 also, where that's present. Really colorful colors, wide shots, just Western framing, the works. Speaking of Yoko Kanno's music, she knocks it out of the park, of course, again. But there's one aspect of the score that I really, 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 really loved, and I really wish they would have kept in more, was that, how in some of the episodes, I can't recall the specific ones, in the opening, like, pre-credits sequence, which all of them are pretty great, the opening theme, Tank, it's like a bit of it changes, like for the intro, like it changes in variation. Like, for one, I recall it was a saxophone solo leading into the opening, and it goes into the opening and it's kicking hard and it's really good, and then it goes into the original opening. And then there was one where I think it was just the drums and the bass line, and it still carried into the intro. I really liked the variations on the opening title themes leading into the episode. I thought that was a very unique way to introduce the episodes, and sets the show apart that even more from the original anime in a good way. And there are a lot of things in this adaptation that sets it apart in a good way. Like, for one, again, the performances. I mean, John Cho as Spike is great. He embraces every side of that character so well. Costume design wise, great costume design. Nothing felt like a cosplay at all. I saw a lot of comments saying like, "Hey, this show looks like it's your typical day at San Diego Comic Con," and it's like, no, not really. I mean, maybe for Pierre Lefaux, that was a bit bit too much with his clown outfit, and that episode was indeed a bit odd, bit out there. But hey, not all of Cowboy Bebop is entirely grounded in this show. All the episodes that Alex Garcia Lopez directed were great. He's done work on The Witcher, Daredevil, Punisher, great work on different TV shows, and he brings it here. And another thing, in terms of the episodes, I mean, they're well paced, but some of them are a bit slower. The last few episodes, for episode 9 and episode 6, I think, or 7, the whole side story with Vicious and Julia, it kind of derived from the main conflict. And as I was talking about in terms of performances, everything having to do with Jet was phenomenal. He just brings that emotion and that extra amount of emotion now that he has a daughter. I mean, that's something that wasn't in the original show. That's a great addition, and it adds a really compelling side of Jet's character. I mean, same thing for Faye. I mean, Daniela Pineda, she's fantastic as Faye, and I'm reiterating these points because I want people to know how great this core cast is, and that a second season with this cast would be phenomenal. I think that if they continue the story the way it is right now, it can actually be something pretty damn good. I know that a lot of people aren't going to like it. I know that a lot of people don't like the Cowboy Bebop show, and I am planning on making a video on this adaptation and the fans' reaction to it because I think it's very important. There's a lot of really good things in the show that are overlooked and favored to the bad, which I guess is fine. Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody has their way of looking at things. But when good things are really there, just try and admire them. This isn't a lackluster effort to adapt something. There are fans behind this. There are seriously talented individuals working on this. And it lived up to my expectations. It still fulfilled them. Like, I'm still happy with the show. I'm happy that it's there. I'm kind of sad that it's a bit mixed. But for the most part, I really enjoyed it. It was funny. There are some really corny jokes in there, but it's corny for corniness sake, and I loved it. It was entertaining. Really, if you wanted to dive in deep and just take the original anime and just compare it to this and just do a full 3-hour video on YouTube about why the show is bad, go ahead and do it. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to watch it because anybody who makes a 3-hour video about anything is something to admire. But I might not agree with it. And I really don't want to see now. What I really don't want to see, I want this to not be as mixed as The Last Jedi, which was super mixed, and there are still people making videos about it, which is amazing. I don't want there to be hour-long videos of saying Cowboy Bebop is a disaster, or Cowboy Bebop is freaking terrible. Like, just give it a chance. Just try and set it apart from the original, and take what you can from the original and apply it to the new one, because it is an adaptation. That's something you can do. But try and separate it. Like, take the characters, take the settings, and try and just plop them into a new story and see how it goes. And that's the mindset I went into for watching Cowboy Bebop. So it's pretty great. Let me know what you guys thought of it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I must not be the only one who actually enjoys this. Like, it's the same situation as Solo, a Star Wars story. Everybody was super mixed about it. Like, not a lot of people liked it. And now it's actually one of the funner Star Wars movies. Like, it's actually really fun. Like, you can throw it on. You don't even have to know backstory or anything. You can just throw it on and be like, that was super fun. Not even that it's related to Star Wars. Like, it's a great time. And the Cowboy Bebop adaptation for Netflix is a great time. It has its flaws, sure, but it's still entertaining. So, props to it. Congrats, guys. You did it. You actually successfully adapted something, and this is the first step into something better. Because with people like this working behind a show, it gives me hope for live-action anime adaptations. With that show aside, and its highly divisive material, which I hope does not get as divisive as other forms of media have in the past. I'm going to give a quick spoiler-free review of Tick, Tick, Boom. I saw the other day Andrew Garfield, Lin Manuel Miranda, his first directorial debut. I saw In the Heights a couple months ago. I thought it was all right. It wasn't like a masterpiece, but I thought it was great. This, I can say, is closer to being really good. Like, it's one of my favorite musical films because of A, Andrew Garfield's performance, B, Andrew Garfield's performance, and C, Andrew Garfield's performance. He knocks it out of the park in this one, guys. If you are an Andrew Garfield fan, you're obviously going to check it out. You're going to love it. I think he's a contender for Best Actor. He embodies the persona of Jonathan Larson so incredibly well. If you watch the video of Jonathan Larson performing Tick, Tick, Boom on stage, there's a video on YouTube. Thank God they filmed it. If you compare it side by side to Garfield, it's almost identical. He dived so deep into that character, and I am super, super, super fascinated by that deep dive and the way he portrays him. He embraces that energy that Larson had. And although I'm not as familiar with his work, I've been rediscovering it through the marvelous world of the internet. And it's safe to say that he just embodies the character. He embodies Jonathan Larson in this film. I already knew that he could sing. He has a past on theater, so I wasn't surprised to hear like, oh, it's cool that he's embracing his theatrical roots, which, by the way, Andrew Garfield is an amazing actor on stage as well. He was in Angels of America or Angels in America. I forgot the name of the play specifically, but I saw that play on this play website. It was like this archive website, and he blew me away. He's so incredibly captivating on stage, and to have those skills translate to the screen, it's phenomenal. Sadly, the film isn't as well paced as I thought it'd be. There's a huge gap in the middle that kind of flounders out a bit, but into the third act is when it really picks up and it gets great. There's this emotional climax that happens that's truly fantastic, and all these songs, all the set pieces and sequences, those are really fun and at sometimes hilarious scenes to watch. But the film also deals with some pretty heavy themes, like of growing older and, of course, the important struggle of an artist, more specifically an actor and a writer, wanting to write something but not having it appear in your mind for a couple days, or having a deadline and not having written anything and feeling completely uninspired. And there's even a point in the movie where a couple has a fight, and the main character is already composing a song around that fight. Like, that's how deep someone can go in creatively to their craft. And I think Tick, Tick, Boom is a great example of that. So if you guys want to go see it, I say check it out because it's actually really good. Like, it's actually really good. And I'd say Garfield is a contender for Best Actor. It's really brilliantly directed. Script-wise, it could have been a bit better. Like, pacing is a bit slow near the middle, but still great. Tick, Tick, Boom, it's safe to say it blew my mind. So yeah, those are the two Netflix-related things I saw this past Thanksgiving week, which were great watches. This episode might be a bit shorter compared to this week's episode. I mean, this is kind of like a double episode week this week because I had my interview with Bruce, of course, which was great. Shout out to Bruce. Dude, love the interview. Loved your insight on filmmaking and Embers. I'm so glad to see that it's doing so well. And in terms of video essays and updates for this channel and the podcast, I know I've been kind of scarce in terms of uploads. One part of it is that I'm kind of getting together a short film project. You know, I'm also a filmmaker on the side of being a film critic and movie rambler. So we're in pre-production currently, but I'm still going to be able to do podcast episodes and Instagram posts. I'm going to be doing some video essays, of course. I've got one planned for The Social Network, and I've got one planned for Spencer. So those two will kind of go hand in hand because they share a similar theme. I'll let you guys guess what that is. It has to do with their trailers and what song is used. And of course, the Cowboy Bebop. I'm not going to be ranting at the negative fans, but I'm kind of going to be like, hey guys, like, take it easy. Just whatever happens, you know? I mean, hey, you can't stop an angry fandom. That's something I've learned from my first year on Twitter. So So yeah, that's what's going on, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode of James and the Frames. Of course, if you want to follow me on Instagram, that's at James24Frames. I'm not really posting too much on there lately, but I'm going to get back into those wonderful, wonderful film review posts. I'm going to be starting out with Dune. That'll be my next post. I've been working on diligently for the past week. So look forward to that. Thank you guys for listening to me rambling a bit more about movies. This was kind of like an open mic sort of thing, something I don't really usually do. So next episode will be a bit more structured, and I'll have a official film to talk about, one that I've been looking forward to talking about for a very long time. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for listening. I will see you after the credits.